So, first of all, what is perineal trauma? Well, it is by definition any damage to the genitalia during childbirth that occurs either spontaneously or intentionally by surgical incision. It's usually a mechanical problem. It's a stretching and a tearing. If we think about the size of a normal vaginal opening and we think about the circumference of a baby's head, they are disproportionately inverted. Oh, you know what I'm talking about. They're the wrong way round. And you shove large babies through small holes, and I'm afraid you're going to take some damage. So at the very least that you could possibly get, you get a grade 1, which is a shallow tear to the skin, and that's frequently referred to as a graze. I've never seen a graze on my knee looking like a graze on a perineum, but never mind. A grade 2 involves the skin and the muscle. Grade 3 involves the anal sphincter muscle, and grade 4 goes all the way through the anal sphincter and the rectal mucosa. So the purpose of my talk really is about those grade 3 and grade 4s. As was alluded to earlier, there were 679,000 live births in England and Wales in 2017, which means that there were 350,000 women in the UK who experienced some perineal trauma. This is the sort of traditional set of data that we've been led to believe, that the third and fourth degree tear rate is about 8%, with the episiotomy rate about 20%. But more up-to-date research has been showing that between the years of 2000 and 2012, the reported incidence has actually risen from 1.8 to 5.9. And some reports even take it as high as 10% in women who are on their first babies. Unfortunately, the UK are not particularly good, and we have a higher rate than our European counterparts, and our ventouse delivery rate has risen considerably, and our episiotomy rates can be reported as high as 30 to 36%. A third of women are having instrumental deliveries with and episiotomies. Why? Well, we're getting older. You know, how many of us are, we looked at the age rate earlier on, and the average age rate is rising. We go back 30, 40 years, and women were in their early 20s. They're now in their late 20s, early 30s. And if you're over 25 years, you're twice as likely to have a problem than if you're a teenage mum. You're not as stretchy. We're getting bigger. Wasn't there something on the television recently about the average weight of a woman, or an average size of a woman in the UK now, and compare it to in the 1970s, and we are considerably bigger. We're doing more instrumental deliveries. Asian ethnicities are twice more likely to have a problem with third and fourth degree tears than their white counterparts. If you're richer, surprisingly, you're more likely to have a problem. And if your babies weigh more. I was a 6'13" baby. That was an average. Babies are averagely 8, 9 pounds. It's not unusual to hear about a 10-pounder. So our babies are getting better because our mums are bigger and we're eating better. We're just creating bigger babies. And then if you have a shoulder dystocia, which we're going to hear a little bit more about later, then again, that is more likely to cause you to have problems. Why is the rate going up? Well, is it actually that we're just detecting them better? Are we asking the questions more? Are we educating our midwives better to identify these problems? Have we changed the management of the second stage of labour, the active pushing stage of labour? And are there changes to the social patterns and our health behaviour patterns? Are we less active? Are we not as stretchy because we're not as physically active in our day-to-day lives? So you suffer a problem, a third or fourth degree tear. What problems are you likely to have? Well, immediately you expect to have pain. You could have incontinence of your bladder or your bowel, but then in the opposition, you could actually have difficulty emptying your bladder or your bowel. 2/3 of women will have urinary incontinence in their pregnancies. 1/3 of women will have urinary incontinence after they've had their babies, and between 2 and 10%, and it's difficult to get the statistics because people won't own up to it. A lot of women will say, oh, I've had an oops moment, or I'm a tenor lady. But how many women will say, don't make me laugh because I'll poo myself? So it's very underreported, but up to 10% of women will have bowel incontinence after childbirth. We know that pregnancy is a significant risk factor for prolapse. 40% of women in the UK will have some sort of prolapse. if you look at the population we've got sitting in front of me here, that's rather a lot of us who are very likely to develop some sort of a prolapse. We have a lifetime risk of surgery of 11%. And those who have the surgery, a third of those will need redoing. 10 to 14% of women will experience painful intercourse 12 months after having had a baby. Again, you have to be very careful when you're reading the research on dyspareunia, on painful sex, because some of the researchers were actually asking women 6 weeks postnatally, does it hurt to have sex? How many women are having sex 6 weeks postnatally? So 12 months is usually, it's what got them into trouble in the first place, but so we can usually consider 12 months to be quite a safe sort of time that people have started to have sex again. The Nisha very succinctly put about the psychological problems, and so I'm not going to go into those at all because I am a physiotherapist, not a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, but I just found that this was a really interesting article, that the psychological impact of perineal trauma. There were 3 themes that emerged from this study. The abandoned mother describes how women feel vulnerable, exposed and disempowered throughout the labour and birth, and how these feelings are a direct result of the actions of their healthcare professionals. The fractured fairy tale explores the disconnect between the expectations and reality of the birth experience and the immediate postpartum period for women, and how this reality impacts on their ability to mother their newborn child and the sexual relationship they have with their partner. And finally, A Completely Different Normal discusses the emotional pathway that women travel as they work to rediscover and redefine a new sense of self following severe perineal trauma. So the impact of perineal trauma on both the emotional and the physical is not to be underestimated. But good news really is that 60 to 80% of women are asymptomatic 12 months following delivery and external anal sphincter repair. So that's the really good news, and that's what we need to keep reminding women, is that the majority of them will resolve. But we need to be able to offer treatments that can hasten their recovery and treatments that can treat patients who have got symptoms. So that's where the physiotherapist steps in. Now, people have a very strange idea of what physiotherapy is about. I often get asked, what do you do? I'm a physio. Oh, can I tell you about my back pain? No, please don't. Haven't touched orthopaedics for 28 years. I'd be a liability. The media don't help me in that they put some pictures up about what is pelvic floor physiotherapy. And this picture at the bottom was actually in a physiotherapy journal talking about pelvic floor exercises. And I am currently having a little bit of an issue with our own journal, having produced this, and I said, what do you think that's a picture of? And they said, it's a pelvic floor exercise. I said, it's an exercise for the pelvis on the floor. That's not the same thing. The other one is you get the ladies who come along with their trainers and their tracksuits, and they've come along to do a bit of physio in a class. It's nothing like that. All right, so what is the role of the physio? Well, first of all, it's about reassurance. It's about telling people that this is very unfortunate what has happened to you, but you are not alone. It happens to a lot of people. This is all I do every day, 13 women a day, 5 days a week for the past 28 years. So I see a lot of this problem. The timing is really important as to when to start physio, because you want to pull your tight jeans on and leave that hospital looking like your size 10 again, and you want your undercarriage to be all nice and tight and lifted again, and you've just shoved something the size of a bowling ball out. I'm afraid that's not going to happen. And so you do need to think about the timing as when you start your active physio. We don't touch our patients for 6 weeks, because nature is amazing, and an awful lot will settle down in the first 6 weeks. So we prefer to let things calm down, let your hormones settle, get used to who you are, this new role in your life, and then you'll be able to apply a little bit of time for yourself, because when they first come out of hospital, it's really not a high priority. We want to be able to signpost to specialist services, and our specialist assessment that you get in physiotherapy does include examination, and I'll come to that in a moment. And physio gives individualised, progressive, supervised pelvic floor muscle rehabilitation. Sounds quite impressive, doesn't it? You all know about pelvic floor exercises, but what we offer is that little bit extra for you. And then as a physio, I need to be able to identify when my role is finished and I can move people on to a more appropriate service. So a physiotherapy assessment starts with a questioning. It gives the girl an opportunity to talk through things, to have a slight debrief as to what's gone on. And the referral that I get, the letter, and the woman that I have sat in front of me often don't tie in. So I always say to people, tell me your story, tell me why you're here. Tell me what you want to get out of coming to physio. And sometimes they don't even know why they've been sent. And they've just been sent because they're a third-degree tear and routinely been sent along. And sometimes you can actually create more problems than you solve because they actually don't think they've got a problem and they may not have a problem. So blanket referrals doesn't always work. You do have to really tailor your referrals. So we ask in a general about what they're here for. Then we go through all of their general medical and surgical history because these girls are not appearing totally in isolation. They've got a history. They've come from somewhere. So if they've had a history of, say they're particularly springy, so what we used to call the double jointeds, so these people who have got very elasticy tissues, they're going to be more vulnerable to developing these problems. So we want to know what their sort of previous history has been like. We want to know the causative factors during childbirth, what their current symptoms are. Again, a lot of them are more than happy to talk about their bladders, but not so keen to be open about their bowels, and no one's ever asked them about sex. Isn't that what got them there in the first place? And then we also want to know what the woman's personal goal is herself. And then a physio will do an objective assessment. And that's when they go, you want to do what? Well, I want to have a look at your pelvic floor. Why do you want to do that? Well, if you'd sprained your ankle, you'd be very disappointed if I didn't look at it. You'd be desperate to get your sock off to show me your bruising, to show me your swelling, and then I'm saying I need to have a look at your pelvic floor to see how it works. So if you're not being offered a pelvic floor assessment, then you're not getting a proper physiotherapy treatment. So we look at the anatomy. Does everything look like it's in the right place? We're looking at the state of the skin. We're looking to see what the sensation is like. Are there areas of numbness, of pins and needles, of tingly? Then we look at the muscle strength and we look at how strong it is, how long they can hold a squeeze for, how quickly can they turn their pelvic floor on. It's no good having a pelvic floor that kind of wakes up if a sneeze has happened instantaneously. So we need to look at all different aspects of how a muscle works. And it's also really important that we know how a pelvic floor relaxes. You can have a condition called hypertonic pelvic floor, whereby the woman has worked her pelvic floor so tight that she can't let go of it. And then she's more at risk of developing urinary tract infections, difficulty emptying her bowels, painful intercourse. So it's just as important to be able to squeeze and to be able to relax. And then we also have little gadgets that we can use in physio to measure your muscles. So we can have EMG, which is electromyography. So you know how when you have an ECG tracing, then you can see your heart tracing? Well, we have a device that will actually measure the muscle activity of your pelvic floor. Or you can have real-time ultrasound. So you can have an ultrasound head placed on the perineum and you can actually see the muscle working. Now, the advantage of a biofeedback measurement is that because it gives you a picture in real time, you can actually see what's happening there and then. So it helps with your coordination. But we also take a snapshot of what's happening now so that when we bring the woman back and we repeat the exercises with her, we're going to be able to see if she's progressing on her exercises at all. Pelvic floor muscle rehabilitation. Right, it's individualised. You can pick up a leaflet, you can open a website, you can go to a talk on how to do pelvic floor exercises, but that doesn't give you what you as an individual need. Everybody's needs are a little bit different. So we want to make sure that we know what your start point is like so we know where we're building. It's got to be progressive. One exercise is not going to last you forever. If anybody's done the Couch to 5K app, you don't just keep running for 30 seconds for the whole 9 weeks of the program. You progress, and your pelvic floor exercise program should progress as well as you improve. And it's got to be functional. we've got to be able to use our pelvic floor in the activities that cause us to have problems. And so I might be looking with somebody who was quite a high-level athlete at doing exercises in movement, but somebody else I might have to do those exercises in lying. It's down to the individual. And we consider it to be a prescription of exercise. So somebody goes out with a piece of paper that says very precisely what they need to be doing, how long they should be holding for, how long they should be relaxing for, and then that prescription gets changed each time they come. Exercise only works if you work at it. How many people own a Fitbit that they've never really used? Yeah. How many people have got a gym membership that lasted beyond February? So you need to work at exercise for it to work for you. And the research says it takes 4 months. How boring. Pelvic floor exercises are dead boring. But you need to know that you've got to stick at it. And one of the really nice things about the new NICE guidelines that only came out on the 2nd of April say that you have to have 4 months of exercise to make a difference. So the patient is aware of what their responsibility is, and the therapist can also use that when they're commissioning with their CCGs, that this is not a case of giving a leaflet out and saying, we've done pelvic floor exercises, we've covered that side of things. It's about an ongoing service for people. Then we have our biofeedback, and we also have neuromuscular stimulation. So stimulation is like a TENS machine, and what it does, it actually makes the muscle work so that you get the feeling of how it's meant to work, but it won't strengthen you. If slender tone worked, wouldn't we all sit there with a bag of chips on a Saturday night and our slender tone on, doing 50,000 sit-ups while the telly's on? It's not going to work like that. Electrical stimulation enhances a movement so that you can then learn how to use it for yourself. This is a picture of the biofeedback that you would see in my clinic. So there is the little device, the white little device at the bottom, that's the vaginal probe. The patient pops that inside. She does everything herself. Once I've done the examination, I don't touch her. This is all about her taking responsibility for herself. She does the squeeze on the little probe, and then you get the little pattern drawing on the computer. And they love to go home with their little printout they can stick on the fridge if this is what mummy's achieved today. And the worst thing is when you get friends. My friend got an 83. Yeah, well, your friend doesn't have your pelvic floor, and my mum's got more than me, and all of this sort of thing. So we have to say that we're looking for trends within yourself, not comparing you. Gadgets and apps, digital world. People love to buy things on the internet. They don't want to go and see their GP because they're embarrassed because their GP's a 30-year-old rugby-playing male who's not interested in your pelvic floor. So I'll buy something off the internet myself. There are things that are recommended, and there are things that are a little bit dubious. So there's a biofeedback units, there's an LV that you may have heard about, which has had quite a lot of coverage, which is a lovely device. There's another one called Vibrance. They're both biofeedback units. The only thing I would say about them is they are quite expensive. I know you can get the LV on secondary care prescription now, but it's not that well widespread, and you're still talking in the region of £150 for a gadget. Pelvic toner is a spring-loaded device, which looks like an instrument of torture. It's got two long plastic arms with a spring in the middle, and you squash it together, you pop it in, it springs open, and then you have to squeeze your muscles to try to get it together. It has a value, possibly, but it's, again, a one-size-fits-all. And then you can buy your own electrical stimulators. There are apps that you can get. There's the Squeezy app that a lot of people will have heard about. There's a My Pelvic Floor Fitness. There's a Pelvic Floor First. These are apps that just are a digital nag. All they do is remind you to do your exercises. They don't do it for you. You've still got to do it for yourself. So how do you know that you're doing it right? Well, go and get yourself a physio. There are 800 specialist pelvic floor physios in the UK who are members of this POGP that I am the chair for. So pelvic obstetric gynae physiotherapy. If you send an email via our website with your postcode, we are able to give you the contact details of a physio who's on our membership database in your locality. There are a couple of other directories that have been brought out by commercial companies. The Squeezy Find a Physio, any physio can put up their own details as long as they're HCPC registered. And then there's a new one in London called Peppy, and they are supporting all sorts of perinatal specialists. And the difference with Peppy at the moment is they are only looking for our qualified physiotherapists who have the specialist master's level of training. So there's lots of ways that you can find a physio, but what we would say is do seek help, encourage your women to seek help, and use your physiotherapist. Thank you very much.